Chapter 30. The Survivor. A surreal chime pulled me from the depths of sleep. I could not breathe. The air-tight pod was out of oxygen. I struggled to be released from its grip, and with a kick, the seals unlocked. It was freezing, snowing outside. I frantically searched the pod and found a thick hooded jacket packed away into the onboard survival kit. The air was thin. Unable to face the ripping winds, I crept back into the reoxygenated pod, opening the air vents and surveying what I had on hand. The storm outside subsided, and then I ventured out again. My optical tracker indicated the 3 other signals against the white snow, our distances varying from each other. I was the furthest away. I could not get their feeds, though. I shuddered with the thought that maybe only I survived. Using a pair of binoculars, I saw nothing on the horizon, only a white line beneath pink sky. I crouched in the snow and smiled. Walayan was beautiful. Somehow my pod landed at the edge of her northern pole. On my back, I wore a big pack full of all the provisions packed away in the pod. My optical tracker kept a triangulated reading of where the pod was located, so I could get back to it for shelter. I wondered how I was going to get to the others. Then I heard something, a running behind me. I turned. It was a wolf. I ran. It pursued me, but the snow was too deep. Eventually, we both tired, and the wolf merely whined and crawled through the snow, panting, exhausted. I approached it. It showed its fangs, and so I put up 2 hands to try to calm it. Its wild eyes flashed, desperate for a kill to survive. It could not move. I crouched over it, and it bit at me. From my back, I removed a ration of dry meat. I rolled it into a ball and placed it on the snow before the wolf's snout. His teeth immediately were sheathed, and now its tongue licked at the meat, its eyes now soft with relief as the wolf fed. I gave it more of the dried meat and ate some myself. As it ate, all of its hostility vanished. I thought then I should part ways, feeling it would gain strength and then trudge back to wherever it came from. As I left, it whined, barked. I returned to it. It whined, looked over its shoulder at me as if to ask for a helping hand. Deciding to trust the only living thing out here, I went to the animal and offered my hand to it to test if it would bite it. It did not. I petted its head. It licked my hands. It wasn't wild. I then noticed its hind leg was bleeding. The storms seemed to be picking up again. I drew the wolf up into my arms and pulled him out. I placed my friend into the pod with me. I had no reason whatsoever to be engaged with the wolf, but somehow it made sense to aid him in his healing. The weather was brutal. When the sun disappeared, the cold was unimaginable. The wolf kept me warm as we slept in the pod, which was now devoid of all power, a mere flimsy shell. I bandaged the wolf's leg and fed it more of my rations. I figured Bren would have eaten the dog by now, but I could not. After a day, I awoke, and the wolf was gone. I felt like a fool. I tried to pull the pod out of the snow, but it was too heavy. I had to figure out something else. I walked for miles. The sun was high, its light reflecting brutally off the snow, and as it receded toward the horizon, the darkness of cold death approached, as I had no shelter. Then, I heard it barking. The wolf. It was far to my left on a mound of snow, hailing me. I went to him, and he ran ahead. I followed. I lost him, and then on another mound of pink, backlit snow, I saw my friend beckoning me to follow, seeming to wish that I would better keep up. I followed the wolf until the sun seemed only a sliver on the horizon, the cold pressing into me. My friend barked frantically, and so I ran with all my might, not stopping until I nearly caught up with him. He was now headed downhill toward a curious mound in the snow. A shelter of some sort. Oh, I gasped, and I ran. By the time I got to the mound, the darkness set in. I only crawled within it and took shelter with the wolf, which crawled inside to a dark place, out of the wind. He rested his head on my lap as I leaned against metal and fell asleep. I dreamt of a Mayak. He stood before me. I looked into his face and he into mine as if wondering if I could really see him now. Somehow I knew his name. "You are Kandaj, the Wolf Rider," I said. "Yes, dreamer. I am the wolf, a survivor. The heart of the Mayak and the heart of the white man you call Bren. Though wayward, he is one of ours, as Mayak don't recognize silly lines drawn on the land. Our hearts wander throughout Ashuta's light play." I realized I was dreaming, and I could see the meaning more clearly of what would have been merely coded impressions if awake. Kandaj revealed to me, via heart data, if you will, that Bren, by his blind loyalty and fierceness, indeed had a Mayak heart, and was also akin to the wolf. This had gone unnoticed by me for so long. Bren had been sent to help me on my journey. The greater impact of the revelation to me, however, was that the snow wolf was a projection of that same intention. This was why I could only help it, trust it, for I was aligned with Bren. "Thank you, brother," Kandaj said. "Your kindness and love given to Mayak has been shown again, and so because of your gestures, we are here to help you in your journey, my Khoorhani brother." I was dressed in my Khoorhani garb, a tunic of animal skins and fur boots, my hair long again. He bowed and gave me a necklace of wolf teeth. "Will you please bring this to Ashuta when you arrive at her feet?" he asked. I accepted. Then others appeared, warriors from other clans, plainsmen, Kwa, and Bantu. They too brought gifts for me to bring to Ashuta. I accepted them. I will bring them. I then saw Ursia, radiant, so vivid to me. She came to me and I embraced her, kissed her. I was overcome with joy and desire in looking upon her. I was so happy to understand that our marriage came to this. As we held each other, she pressed her forehead to mine and gave me her visions. My brothers, Minot and Protoge, fought a hard war, but then stopped. They instead united and brought together all of the tribes of the Great One Land. They joined the clans of the Wolf, Ursia said, referring to the Banes. We have a common enemy now. They're not like Bren, Ursia. They're not to be trusted, I warned. The Great One clan has been realized, she said. Come to us. She smiled. No, I warned, but she remained giddy and hopeful. They will only use Minot, Ursia. You must let go. Chapter 31. The Flight. I awoke in my new strange surroundings. A large cylinder caked with ice, the sun peeking through the hole in the wall of snow where Khoorlrhani, the wolf, stared at me, and then entered the shelter. I yawned and inspected my surroundings with the benefit of morning glow. Still bitterly cold, I shivered upon rising. Khoorlrhani and I ate a small breakfast of more rations. His ears were spikes, his eyes dead set on more. A curious expression of expectation held in his gray eyes. I held out on him. We have to save it, I told him. He sniffed about the snow floor looking for any bits that might have fallen. I then realized what we had been sleeping in as I pushed beyond the snow and ice through a narrow section to be let out of what was a giant engine thruster. As I stepped outside, I got a clearer view of it as out of the snow. Jutting upward was the back end of a ship, at least the size of the Corsair, perhaps even bigger as much of it was buried in the snow. I could not help but laugh as Khoorlrhani stepped out into the light with me. Thank you, brother, I said to him, grinning. Thinking I was speaking of food, Khoorlrhani quickly approached, ears raised, in expectation. I worked the entire day digging out the craft, It seemed my endeavors did not even get me a quarter of it free. It was impressive and seemed to be a military-grade ship, only its various symbols and logos made it seem otherwise. This craft was nothing like what I had studied at Khoorhani. Inside, we suffered the deep cold but stayed safe from the winds at night, and each day I dug more, but the storms undid my work every night. Tired and low on rations, I began to fade. I could not raise the will to keep going. I awoke to Khoorhani violently tugging at my sleeves. He would not let me sleep, and then he barked at me. He seemed to know I was giving up. I fell asleep. On top of me was Khoorhani in his human form, slapping me. "Khoorhani, you are so soft! Rise!" And behind him I could see through the snow as if it were transparent. I could see there was another way. Khoorhani slapped me again, and I rose in my dream body. "Rise!" he yelled. I awoke, standing, and looking the direction where my attention was held in my dreams, into the fuselage. The sun was up, and I began to tunnel down to where I had hoped I would find a hatch. In time, my numb hands hit metal, and I was able to clear snow along the hull until I found it, the hatch. Opening it took hours and the remainder of my strength, but finally it gave way. My frozen hands blistered from the unforgiving circular latches. Warm air spilled out, making a sound as it went and soothing my frostbitten face. I struggled to get the door to slide all of the way open, enough to allow me through. I lost my balance and fell into the darkness, slamming into the floor. I slid across a harsh, grated steel floor and landed against the bolted-down legs of metal furniture. It was slightly warm inside of the craft, but the air smelled of absolute death. Above me, in the light, I saw Khoorhani's curious head popping inward, apprehensive to make the jump in the dark. I warned him to stay put. He sat at the top, looking down. My side ached from the impact of my fall as I crawled about the darkness in the cabin. I began to cough wretchedly again. I was drawn to a single amber light that flickered in the distance. Finding myself exploring deeply into the cabin, I rounded a corridor that led to another black opening. The stench was unbearable. And in not being able to see, I retreated back to the hatchway where light poured in. With great effort, I climbed the small ladder and exited to find my flashlight and other supplies. When I climbed down again, Khoorhani protested, not being able to follow. Having found a small flashlight within my kit and wrapped a cloth around my nose and mouth, I re-entered the black depths. The amber light was flashing against a kind of electrical box. I opened it, reset the fuses, and an array of lights fluttered and turned on. I laughed and plopped onto the floor. It was that simple. The ship was still alive. Behind me was a ladder leading to both an upper and lower deck. I went up, and as I expected, found bodies. 2 of the crew members, trikes, seemed to have been killed and their chairs shot. I was initially horrified by their appearance, but I was resolved to further investigate the state of the control room. I saw another indicator flashing amber, reset more fuses, and a few more lights again came to life to reveal an impressive console. I looked for anything that resembled what I studied at Khoorhani about trike tech, but this ship was completely different. Still, I was able to decipher the coded menus blinking on the screens, which began to come to life. I used the trike rig, which I patched in, trying to get operating systems back online. This continuously failed, seeming to crash and then start again, dashing my hopes to make use of the ship's operations computer. I left it, and then searched for food, hoping something in the inventory kept, despite the warmer interiors. In the lower decks, I found some items in cans. Relieved, Kondaj and I enjoyed a sweet and pasty substance once I was again outside of the ship and away from the unappetizing stench of death. The next day, I committed myself to restoring the bridge systems. If I could not get anything to run, I figured I would have to accept that the best I could hope for was to use the ship as shelter until I died or stumbled on some other saving grace. If only I could get the ship computer to check itself and report damages. I struggled with all that was lost in translation to me, several layers, the trike language itself, firmware, and software codes, all filtered through this frantic emotional state of mine. If I did not succeed, I would more than likely die here, added to the 2 corpses that occupied the bridge with me. I thought I might even be shot here, found by a trike search party. There were such gaps in my understanding. I could not remember completely all that I learned at the university and began to panic. This is not a simulation, I thought. With no success, heavy-heartedly I left the bridge to eat more mystery paste with Kondaj. I awoke the next day feeling as if I, and a multitude of others, pored over a data blueprint of the ship. A circle of encouraging friends sitting at a table with all of the technology before us. I began to sense that an answer was right before me, and all I had to do was open up to it. I had to calm myself and trust that all that was shown to me would come to the foreground. I then recalled Medea, and grinned as I remembered how my capacities were on loan from her. I went back to work, but this time trusting myself. Then, with a breath, a sudden clarity came. Relaxation, allowing for even thought flow, and intuitive processes of elimination. Now, there was a flash against all the embedded LCD screens on the control console, amber and yellow lines of code scrolling as the operating system now loaded. Then a groan was followed by the high-pitched frequencies of server fans. Behind me, I could hear other systems start up, various clacks and clatter, and the bridge was up. I kept working, wanting to keep alive this fragile flame of creative intelligence as I looked for logs and inventory manifests, as Ansa taught me. After learning there were plenty of usable fuel drums already loaded in the craft, I used the system maps to find where the spares were kept. I found them in the dimness of the bottom deck. I removed one drum, dragging it to the main cabin and hoisting it through the hatch with canvas ropes, straining my back. I rested in the snow, lying supine and coughing again. Kondaj's face hovered over mine, his tongue hanging over my nose. His breath was motivation enough for me to finish my task. After bracing my back by tying cut cloth tightly around my waist, I pried open the fuel canister and cut out half of the fuel from the barrel, placing the excess into a plastic bin I found in the ship. I then took a flare, broke it open, and dropped it into the barrel. The fire took immediately, a strong, solid burn to help thaw the back end of the ship. Kondaj barked, pleased by the heat. I went back into the ship and came out with everything and anything flammable that I could find to keep the fire alive. The heat restored the functionality of the rear thrusters, and so I helped the reluctant wolf into the ship, lowering him down so that he would not get burned should my test work. He went straight to the bridge, seeming to know the layout. By his whining, I knew the trikes and the chair were his former masters. I tested the rear burners held at idle, and there was a loud crack as ice began to break. It was enough so that the ship began to immediately, albeit slowly, thaw and lower, evening her out. Kandaj whined as the ship swayed, the sound of ice cracking disturbing him. I was relieved when sensors on the wings of the craft indicated the wings were not damaged by the crash or breaking free from the thawing ice. The rear of the ship was now slightly lower than the front. With some fuss, I was able to activate the landing gear that seemed to brilliantly compensate for uneven surfaces. She was now flat and standing free. My optical tracker showed that the others were now closer to one another. I was still too far off from where their pods crashed for them to get to me. Red and Ansa seemed to have been traveling toward each other. I only hoped it was really them and not the trikes, carrying their bodies. Bren's signal seemed further away. I worried the trikes may have found the G-150's microsatellite and were tracking us with it. The G-150 was designed to jettison the satellite, a small black cube, more than likely hiding within the debris of our destroyed craft, to provide global tracking to the team. Now I had to get the ship off the ground. I had already spent nearly 2 weeks trying to revive the vessel, and as I stood on top of the roof watching the sunrise, I placed a few more barrels of burning fuel near the fat wings to help thaw them out. I noted the ship was impressively designed. I was pleased that, by my breath, by my flame for Medea, I could see it all and was grateful for my time at Konovich. All of it for play. What an adventure. I smiled, knowing Red would be jealous of my new bird, which is what he'd call it, no doubt, and I could not wait to show her off to him. The climate controls, no longer overwhelmed by the surrounding ice outside, began to better keep the ship dry. With the landing gear on the ground, the bottom lower hatches were now accessible. I could take care of the bodies, which were too heavy to have pulled through the top hatches by myself. I burned them, and Kandaj paid his last respects. With the rising of internal temperature, other systems seemed to start themselves and initiate their routines. I then could not fight off an eerie feeling that the ship was alive, a powerful psyche from which I could feel impressions alien to me. I pushed off such thoughts, telling myself I was acting like a frightened child. Still, these impressions persisted as if to command my attention. As I was in the lower deck, inspecting the landing gear, I heard a voice. I grabbed the red fire axe mounted on the gray metallic lower deck wall and snuck back into the bridge, only to find a video recording. The voice was coming from a talking head shown on a screen. Only when the ramparts of the majestic castles of tyranny burn by our own hands in revolution will others know that they are not alone in their desire to be free of it. The message, all in trike, faded. I watched it again and again, the face seeming less and less alien to me. More impressions flooded into me, a quicksilver of impulse and imagery. I had the urge to search the lower decks of the ship. I descended down the ladder, traversing the darkness, and came upon torn open compartments that were once hidden in the floor of the lower deck. They were full of explosives, something unique and powerful as told by this harsh psychic sense language. I could not continue to doubt the presence of this psychic energy, and once I accepted it, I was told how to soften its transmission. Through the medium of intuition, I was told to modify the signal on my optical tracker to decrease the feed, the Psylink. The onboard Trike AI was using it. It hacked in and was communicating with me, imploring me, almost desperately, to continue its mission and deliver its payload of radiation bombs to a target, the city of Crow. I no doubt had it to thank for the influx of knowledge to bridge the gaps in my understanding and fix the ship. The radiation bombs made the idea of lifting off an intimidating prospect. My first instinct was to drop the cargo, leave it behind in the ice, but I could not bring myself to do it. Who were these men I buried? With that thought, the video segment suddenly played again, but on multiple screens. Only when the ramparts of the majestic castles of tyranny burn by our own hands and revolution will others know that they are not alone in their desire to be free of it. I left the bridge terrified by the intensity of the feelings that seemed to move me, possess me, unable to reconcile fully that it was machine-based, its psychic speech clear and yet harsh and exacting. I still, in my ignorance, feared that the ship was haunted by the dead alien men. Perhaps their cremation burial was an offense. I could not find them in dreams, however. They were nowhere to be found so that I might correct my error. In the rooms of dream, the Myok would not go with me and remained in wolf form at the top of a dark corridor. Dolgi appeared in my dreams. They can no longer dream well, Khoorhran, he said, speaking of the crew, stopping me with an outstretched hand. They cannot follow you here. Do not seek them out, he warned. He then said, the vessel is their offering, the coin of their forsaken race. You will deliver it to her, and that is it. He and Aman appeared before me. They were vibrant. I obeyed Dolgi, and I understood that Dolgi and Aman were present, now to communicate on my behalf to the presence in the ship. With unmistakable authority, they said that I was to be served in my mission, and that the ship's destiny lay beyond the city of Crow. This shocked the entity, who at brief moments appeared as a wild Mayra. But I could see now that the AI's mission was merely programmed into it by the former crew. Dolgi removed it, tamed the Mayra. The AI submitted, her light body form now human, prostrating before Madia's herald and guardian. Who were these men that I buried, I still wondered. Terrorists, I wonder, freedom fighters? I remember Master Paen saying once, it's all just a game of perception. Better to just wake up. That is the real revolution. And so I did wake up, my head against cool metal, onto which I drooled. An impressionic tale was still unfolding in my mind. She, the AI, still spoke to me. She was stolen from the Trican military and integrated into the ship's computer by rebels who planned to travel to the Diamond region, my world, to transport a number of slaves they would soon free from this place, Walayan. The lethal cargo below was to be set off, destroying a quarter of the city. The Trikes would not find the ship, for the onboard cloak had never been encountered before. Somehow everything in their plan culminated to a fatal moment between the men I buried. The two crew members killed each other, one having second thoughts as the other, the man in the video, tried to convince his comrade to complete the mission. "You are wrong, brother. We are the change. Only when the ramparts of majestic castles of tyranny burn by our own hand in revolution will others know that they are not alone in their desires to be free of it." It did not matter. In the blink of an eye, it seems the purpose of the ship went beyond their scope. Other ships abandoned the mission, having lost their leaders to the infighting. Khoorlrhani, the name of this ship, I learned, told me everything about the Trikes. Khoorhani, the actual homeworld, which was another star system away, and the heartbreaking story of more kings at war and princes vying to rule. There was no victory. Everything was the same. Walayan was a broken world, the poor souls within it no longer able to dream of the divine. That was why Dolgi stopped me. Little did the Walayan slaves know of it, but Sten was no place to escape to. I then remembered what I saw as we were in orbit of the G-150 over Walayan. As Narswa opened her bay doors, two ships were let out and made their way to the surface of the planet. I had no doubt they were slave ships. The psychic flow that Khoorlrhani shared with me revealed that thousands of Odan, my people, were transported from Sten to Walayan to work as slaves. I buried my face in my hands in anguish as I could not help but see all their names. The psychic feed of the ship's manifest reduced these people to cargo. 6-foot male, 135 pounds, healthy. 5.5-foot female, 130 pounds, healthy. There was no escape. The rebels of Walayan were doomed to fail. The ship, however, had been placed mysteriously in my hands. Later, I found the copy of Red's book on Nadsade mythology among my things. I opened it and began to read. Nyada and the 6 Pearls. Anandanan, an inquisitive child, came to his guru, Nyada, and asked her, "Master, how can I awaken? I only keep dreaming." Nyada took a walk with her very young devotee to old Nyambreth, never saying a thing in answer, only holding his hand as they walked through the town. They passed the merchants, selling succulent fish soups, shiny gems, amazing puppets, toys, and beautiful dragon saddles. They walked for a long time, and Anandanan hoped his master was going to buy him his favorite lunch item. Master Nyada, however, did not. Instead, they walked straight through the town and then past the rice fields and continued up a hill where the master sat with a very young devotee beneath a xanthorn tree. Anandanan was quiet and gazed at his bright, wonderful guru, his heart opening by the expanse of radiance that permeated from her divine form. Nyada, with her voice of heart, said to her child, "To awaken, take these 6 pearls. I will walk ahead. As I leave, do japa on my name. Feel my name spoken here, in your heart. In 3 days, come to me, back to the ashram, and open your hand to me. If you have all 6 pearls, then you will awaken." And so the master left her devotee behind. The first day it began to rain. Anandanan did japa on Nyada's name, speaking her name in his heart. The second day brought snow. Anandanan did japa on Nayada's name, speaking her name in his heart. The third day, the strongest winds, along with rain and snow, came. Anandanan did japa on Nayada's name, speaking her name in his heart. Anandanan traveled, still doing japa, where he noticed the road leading to Nyhembreth. He chose to avoid it, for he knew that his japa was weak when so greatly tempted by his favorite things. He held all 6 pearls, saying Nayada's name until he arrived back at the ashram. "Master, here are your pearls," he said to Nayada, who took them back. All 6 were returned. Anandanan instantly realized the self. Many years later, Master Anandanan gave his pupil Tiber this same test. Tiber, however, could not leave the adventure of the marketplaces behind. He believed he would be able to go through it, and still deliver the 6 pearls to his master. "Do you know where you left the 1 pearl not returned?" asked the master of his devotee. "I do not, Lord," Tiber replied. "Then you must go back. You must know who you tend to be in the marketplace of egos." Anandanan said. When Tiber returned, not only had he not found the 1 pearl, but he lost the remaining 5. He returned with nothing. "Your practice is weak because you are not realistic. You are still attached to self-imagery, and you hide this from yourself. This is why you don't know which qualities of your ego steal the wealth of your sadhana from you." Anandanan explained to his devotee, "When this test was put to me by my guru, I knew that to accept myself, the quality of my nature, was not a sin. Acceptance is a conscious implement. Weakness is not a sin. Vanity is a sin. Unconsciousness is a sin. That which holds you to self-reference is the core of all sins. Know now to be realistic about your shortcomings, so that you may allow God to compensate, should the Lord decide to." I studied the navigation system, then plotted a course. I would not leave the atmosphere and needed to fly low to avoid detection if I could. I would travel south over 2,000 miles towards Ansa's signal, closing in on red. They seemed to be in a desert outskirt, or rather a warmer zone, but not warm by much. Bren's signal was deep within the one massive city that registered on the holographic map. The ship's artificial intelligence informed me that indeed, was the city called Crow, a giant refinery and labor colony, a hub of Trican industry, the target of the former crew of this ship. I nervously clutched the levers for liftoff. I checked everything I could remember and then rechecked as Kondash sat tied down on a black metal couch in the main cabin. Strapped in, I initiated all engines, and with sweaty and shaking hands, leaned over, ready to pull the heavy sliders back. I did pull, and with a loud rumble, she began to rise quickly, and so I engaged the primary and secondary thrusters, propelling us forward. No thought, just flying as the indicators showed my altitude, already approaching 1,000 feet. My heart raced as I threw out the thought of the thousands of pounds of explosives in the lower decks, and instead increased forward thrust by 70% and decreased vertical by 30%. My palms were sweating against the metallic controls. Suddenly, the engines stalled, my jaw dropping. I felt our inertia wane and the craft drifting. Gravity made apparent as I seemed to rise above my seat, pressing into the shoulder straps. Kondaj whined. The indicators turned an illuminate red. Alerts reporting engine failure. I pulled back on the heavy sliders, turned the engine off, and then on, and then engaged the thrusters. Again, I slammed them forward, making the ship shake with sputtering turbulence. I then pulled back, a sputter. Then again, and I knew we were now spinning. I slammed the sliders forward violently against the handles, and then there was a roar. I lost which way was up, and the heavy ship was sent hurtling, spiraling, luckily upward. I pulled back on the controls and was able to level her off. The indicators shifted back to yellow on the control panel. Traveling a straight line now, my trajectory corrected, I punched it. With a boom, my new ship moved faster than sound. Khoorlrhani. The AI scrawled text across my field of vision via the link. Suggest autopilot as an option.